Midlife now, it's seriously like the new black. Everyone is so happy to say, I'm in midlife. I'm thriving. I can't wait. I feel like this is the best part of my life so far, this decade of my 50s and into my 60s. I feel empowered. And just being amongst women who feel like that just lifts you and gives you the hope that life is just going to get better.
Welcome to Your Second Act, the podcast that proves that life doesn't have to end at 40, 50, or even 60, because when it comes to living your best life, age is just a number.
Welcome back, guys. I can't believe it has been a couple of months since I've actually sat down and had a really good open chat with you guys. It's been so long, but I just thought I need to do a little solo with you guys because there has been so much happening on my end. And to be honest, I have not had the mental capacity to put out episodes, hence why you probably haven't had any popping up in your library. So I really apologize for that, but you know how life works out sometimes. Things get in the way. And I definitely have had a lot thrown at me, probably most of this year. And I just hit, I think it was the end of May, and thought, I need time out. And I've really missed speaking to you guys. I've missed speaking to these amazing women that come on the podcast. But I really needed to just stop to reassess a lot because it's weird how you find that you might get into the groove of life and you think, yeah, I've got this all sorted now. Finally, I am on track with what I want to do. I feel really good. I feel that I'm where I'm meant to be. And then you get too complacent and life will throw a spanner in your face. And it definitely did to me. Now, not to go into too much detail, but there has been a hell of a lot of change in my life of late. And it's interesting how I feel in the last few years, I've really grown a lot as a person and really proud of myself for putting myself out on this platform. And it was really scary, as I talk about a lot throughout this podcast and with the people that I speak to, that it's so important that you just kind of push through those fears. But I don't know, there was something that was just blocking me and I just couldn't. I felt like I just didn't even have a voice to come on and talk to you guys. But today I do. And I feel like I want to get back on track. And the changes that have been happening have been, at first I thought that they were bad and negative, but now coming through them, I've realized that, gee, things happen sometimes. They happen for a reason. And now I can look back and see that maybe I wasn't living my life aligned so much to my own values, that I was pushing through with things that were really holding me back. And also, with all of that, I've had to deal with the fact that my eldest child has now flown the nest. She has moved overseas, something she has been wanting to do for a long time. And as a mum, she's my first. That's also been quite a lot for me to get my head around, letting her go and not letting her go down the road or across this other side of the city or in another state. She's actually gone overseas. So there's that control that even though I say, no, off you go, it's your life, do you still kind of have that little tug, that little pull that you can sort of reel them back in if you need to. But now that she's actually gone to the other side of the world, I don't even feel like I have that anymore. It's great because she FaceTimes us, so it doesn't feel like she's so far away. But again, it's a change, and it's a change that I have been dealing with. And to be honest, I think it's early days still, so I'm not sure if I feel numb about it, but I feel okay. But the lead up to it, I guess, was a lot. And through her leaving, it really got my husband and I thinking about our futures and having just one child left at home who's at uni and before you know it, she'll probably want to fly the nest as well. We just started to look at our lives and what we're doing and where we live. And we thought, do we really need to be in this family home now? We have, we live in a beautiful place and we're lucky that we're close to some amazing beaches. We have a pool, but we've noticed in the last few years that those things haven't been used and the maintenance, the upkeep of a home is quite big. And we just decided to put the house on the market. Now, that in itself is a massive task because all those little things that you tend to put up with in your home, all of a sudden you have to fix when you're going to put it on the market. So I all of a sudden got into a situation where I had to get handymen to come around, fix all those little imperfections, get the home styled, pick an agent. I won't bore you, you know how it goes. And then emotionally put it in my head that you're going to move on. So I've been dealing with having to sell my home, my daughter going, and the unknown of the future. So we don't even know where we're going to move to next. And while I'm speaking to you, I'll probably be dropping this episode in the next few weeks. I'm hoping by then the house would have sold because once you set yourself that goal, you just want to move with it. And even though I felt really sad initially about, oh, it's our home, we've been here for 10 years, our girls had their teenage years here, we've got so many lovely memories, I love my community. But I realized that it's exciting. We're going to be moving to our next stage. So my husband and I, this will be our next stage in life, our home, because our girls won't be there. So that in itself, the fact that we're moving on, things are changing, I find it really hard to deal with a lot of change. And that's why I felt like the universe threw me a massive spanner in the face because it's all happening at once. I don't know why, but it just is. So maybe the fact that Mia moving overseas just made us really reassess our life, our values, and what it is that's important to us. So I think when things happen, they definitely happen for a reason. So my life definitely is topsy turvy at the moment. And what I have learnt about myself through going through these big changes is that I actually am trying to live more in the moment, in the now, because I think we are so concerned about what's going to happen in the future that you let the days pass you by. So a friend of mine who came on the podcast last season, Sophie Scott, she has this great practice that what she does every evening before she goes to bed, she writes down in her journal one thing that gave her joy in the day. So I decided to start doing that. And it has been a game changer because I think as humans, we tend to go to the negative side of life and always think, oh, that's probably not going to work out. It's not going to be good. So I just started looking at the day and appreciating what I did in that day, the interactions that I had, the nice things that happened. And just by writing them, it really calmed my nervous system because it has been in the fight or flight mode because I've just been so all over the place and quite anxious about the change and what's happening. So I think what I've learnt about myself is that I can be calm. I can try and think about things in a rational way. Sometimes not so rational, but I'm really emotionally maturing that way. And I'm trying to stop myself from spiraling into those negative thoughts of, I'm not going to like the next stage, or where are we going to end up? Is it going to be what I want? Maybe what I'm doing now isn't right for me. It was just all going round and round in my head. And the second guessing, I absolutely hate second guessing myself. So every day I just wake up in the morning. I'm thankful for my day. I look at what I have to do and I just move through the day trying to stay in the moment. So I guess that's been a big life change for me. And I've just had this little thought in the back of my mind saying, you have to get back into podcasting. You have to get back into speaking to women who have these stories. But I also have been thinking, I really want to show up more for you guys and for me to have these solos with you, to talk to you about how I feel and the things that I'm learning about midlife as well. So you are going to be hearing a lot more from me. I think I need to grow in that sense and really put myself out there because I'm always preaching about how it's important for you to do that. So, I have to practice what I preach. So, the future of this podcast, I'm still continuing on with it. I love this space. I am continuing to connect with amazing women who are doing amazing things. And they could be big, they could be small. There is a lady who I have been following on Instagram who has decided, she's a psychologist, has decided that she wants to become a DJ. So she took herself off and did a course. And on the weekend, she played her first gig. I mean, can you even imagine that? That is so different. So I am trying to convince her to come on the show to tell her story because stories like that are really different. Imagine just thinking, I love music, because this is what I'm able to piece together from all her stories that she's been putting on Instagram. She's always loved music and she just decided to go there and learn how to DJ, to mix the music that she likes. And you could see it in her face, this feeling of, I have landed, I am doing something that I really love. And it's a hobby, but who knows where that hobby will take her. And that's another thing I wanted to tell you. Recently, I've been to midlife discos. Now, the word disco, it sounds a bit lame, doesn't it? Because even back in the day when I used to go clubbing, well, that's what we used to call it back in the 90s, clubbing. And all of a sudden now it's disco. And even though my girls think that's a bit lame, that word, but it has been the best thing that I have done. If you go and have a look on my socials, I've actually done a reel of the first one I went to, and it's held by Bed Before 10. So how cool is this? You start at 3 in the afternoon. So it's a little bit like the school disco when you dropped your kid off at 3 and you pick them up at 7. This goes till 9 o'clock at night. So you are definitely in bed by 10 o'clock. I had the time of my life. I was around people similar age group and just dancing and not caring what anyone else was thinking, grooving to the music. And I could see that everyone was taken back to the days when we used to go out. I love that. I love that these organizations are doing it because where can we in midlife go and dance to music unless you go to a party? But we just don't do that anymore. So amazing. I went to another one that was run by two ladies at the Hordern Pavilion in Sydney, and that was huge. 4,000 menopausal midlife women dancing their asses off. Oh, the energy in the room. So amazing that midlife now, it's seriously like the new black. Everyone is so happy to say, I'm in midlife. I'm thriving. I can't wait. I feel like this is the best part of my life so far, this decade of my 50s and into my 60s. I feel empowered. And just being amongst women who feel like that just lifts you and gives you the hope that life is just going to get better. So I've been doing little things like that. I encourage you, have a look on socials, find a place near where you live that might be holding these type of events, because there is something about dancing, the freedom that it gives you. Oh, I can't even describe how it made me feel. But we did do 11,000 steps on the night. So there you go. It's even a workout. I had a few Red Bull vodkas. Whoa, they were good because then I could dance for hours on end. So I think we went for 4 hours straight. Loved, loved, loved every minute. So the future of this podcast is more inspiring episodes, talking to great women doing great things, having those experts still come on to educate you. I think that's really important because I still love to learn more and more about how life can be better for me through my health, through mental clarity. So I have a whole lot of wonderful people lined up to come into season 4. I also am going to be holding another large event next February. I'm collaborating with another wonderful lady to do that, but I'm also planning some smaller Thriving in Midlife events in the Sydney area. So please keep an eye out and an ear out for those if you do live in Sydney. And who knows, if I gain some great momentum, I'd even love to go to different states with it, because there's nothing better than women coming together and connecting and learning from each other and just vibing off each other. There is really nothing better. And that is what keeps my cup full through midlife. Thank you again for popping me into your ears. I can't wait to keep showing up for you, and let's just make this stage of life the best it can be. So let these stories inspire you, and so you know that you can live the life you truly want, with purpose, with excitement, and with love.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Your Second Act. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love it if you could rate and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback means the world to me.